Have you ever wondered how one ship, built over 100 years ago, is still talked about today? A ship that was called Unsinkable. A ship that carried some of the richest people in the world, and hundreds of ordinary families chasing a better future. A ship so luxurious that people believed nothing could ever happen to it. But on one cold night in April 1912, everything changed. More than 2,200 people were on board. Just a few hours later, over 1,500 of them were gone forever. This wasn't just a shipwreck. It was a story of ambition, confidence, bravery, sacrifice, mistakes, and survival. And even after more than a century, the Titanic continues to fascinate millions of people around the world. So, what really happened that night? Was the iceberg the only reason? Could the disaster have been prevented? And why is the Titanic still lying at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean today? Stay with me until the end, because this is the complete story of the Titanic, the truth behind the world's most famous ship. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been watching my videos before, welcome back. You already know that on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we relive history. So, without wasting any more time, let's travel back to the year 1912. The year was 1912. The world was changing faster than ever before. Electric lights were replacing gas lamps. Cars were becoming more common. Factories were producing goods on a massive scale. People believed technology could solve almost every problem. This was the golden age of progress. Countries competed to build bigger cities, taller buildings, faster trains, and larger ships. Crossing the Atlantic Ocean had become more important than ever. Every year, thousands of wealthy travelers, businessmen, and immigrants sailed between Europe and America. One company wanted to build the greatest passenger ship the world had ever seen. That company was the White Star Line. Instead of building the fastest ship, they wanted to build the most luxurious one. Their dream was simple: create a ship so comfortable and elegant that passengers would never choose another company again. To achieve that dream, they planned 3 giant ships: Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. Among them, Titanic would become the most famous ship in history, but not for the reason anyone expected. Construction of the Titanic began in Belfast, Northern Ireland, at the famous Harland and Wolff shipyard. More than 15,000 workers spent years building what many believed would become the greatest passenger ship ever created. The Titanic was a masterpiece of engineering. She measured 882 feet long, nearly the length of 3 football fields placed end to end. She weighed over 46,000 tons and was one of the largest moving objects ever built by humans at that time. But the Titanic wasn't just big, it was incredibly luxurious. First-class passengers enjoyed grand dining halls, elegant lounges, a magnificent staircase, a swimming pool, Turkish baths, a gymnasium, electric elevators, and beautifully decorated cabins that looked more like rooms in a luxury hotel than on a ship. Second-class passengers also experienced comfort that was better than first class on many other ships of the era. Even third-class passengers, most of whom were immigrants traveling to America for a better future, had cleaner and more comfortable accommodations than were common on other ships. The Titanic was designed to carry dreams. Some passengers were millionaires traveling in luxury. Others carried nothing but hope, believing America would give them a new life. The ship also featured 16 watertight compartments, an advanced safety design for its time. Engineers believed that even if several compartments were flooded, the ship would remain afloat. Because of these innovations, many newspapers described the Titanic as practically unsinkable. People trusted the ship. The crew trusted the ship. Even many experts trusted the ship. But history has shown us one important lesson. No matter how advanced technology becomes, nature always has the final word. And within just a few days of her first voyage, the Titanic would face the greatest test imaginable. On the morning of April 10th, 1912, thousands of people gathered at the port of Southampton, England. Some had come to say goodbye. Others had come to witness history. Standing at the dock was the largest and most luxurious passenger ship ever built, the RMS Titanic. As passengers stepped aboard, excitement filled the air. For many, this was more than just a journey across the Atlantic. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The Titanic carried around 2,224 people, including passengers and crew members. Among them were some of the richest people in the world, such as businessmen, millionaires, and celebrities. At the same time, hundreds of families traveled in third class, hoping to start a better life in America. The ship left Southampton and made 2 more stops. First, at Cherbourg in France, then at Queenstown in Ireland, now known as Cobh. More passengers boarded, while others waved goodbye from the shore, never imagining it would be the last time they would see their loved ones. Finally, on April 11th, 1912, the Titanic began its journey across the Atlantic Ocean toward New York City. The weather was calm. The sea looked peaceful. The passengers laughed, explored the magnificent ship, and believed they were traveling on the safest vessel ever built. Nobody knew that just 4 days later, everything would change forever. The countdown to one of history's greatest disasters had already begun. For the first few days, life on the Titanic felt almost perfect. First-class passengers enjoyed luxurious dinners prepared by world-class chefs. Live music filled the elegant dining halls every evening. People played cards, read books in the library, exercised in the gym, or simply walked along the open decks while enjoying the fresh Atlantic air. Second-class passengers spent their time relaxing with family and making new friends. Meanwhile, third-class passengers sang songs, danced, and dreamed about the new life waiting for them in America. To everyone on board, the voyage seemed peaceful, but hundreds of miles ahead, danger was silently waiting. As the Titanic continued west across the North Atlantic, other ships in the area began sending wireless messages. These messages were not ordinary greetings. They were ice warnings. Large ice fields had been spotted directly along the Titanic's planned route. One message after another arrived on the ship's wireless system. Some warnings reached the bridge. Others were delayed because the wireless operators were extremely busy sending passengers personal messages to land. Captain Edward Smith was informed about several of the warnings, and the crew slightly adjusted the ship's course. However, the Titanic continued sailing at nearly full speed, around 22 knots. Many people later questioned this decision. Why continue at such a high speed when so many ice warnings had already been received? Some historians believe the crew had complete confidence in the ship's advanced design. Others believe they wanted to arrive in New York on schedule. Whatever the reason, the Titanic kept moving forward through the cold, dark Atlantic. As evening fell on April 14, 1912, the temperature dropped rapidly. The sea became unusually calm. There were almost no waves. Ironically, this made icebergs even harder to spot because waves normally crash against them, creating white foam that can be seen from a distance. That night, the moon was hidden. The ocean was dark. Visibility was poor. High above the deck, 2 lookouts stood inside the crow's nest, carefully scanning the endless black horizon. Every minute that passed brought the Titanic closer to the iceberg that would change history forever. Neither the passengers nor most of the crew had any idea that they had only a few hours left before disaster struck. It was Sunday, April 14th, 1912. The time was around 11:40 p.m. The Atlantic Ocean was calm, cold, and completely dark. Most passengers were asleep in their cabins. Others were enjoying the final hours of a peaceful evening, unaware that history was about to change forever. High above the deck, two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, carefully watched the horizon. Suddenly, a dark shape appeared directly ahead. It was an iceberg. Frederick Fleet immediately rang the warning bell 3 times, the signal for danger straight ahead. Then he picked up the telephone and called the bridge. "Iceberg! Right ahead!" The warning reached First Officer William Murdoch within seconds. Without hesitation, he ordered, "Hard a starboard!" At the same time, he ordered the engines reversed in an attempt to avoid the collision. The giant ship slowly began to turn. For a brief moment, it seemed the Titanic might escape, but the ship was simply too large, too heavy, and moving too fast. Only about 37 seconds after the iceberg was spotted, the Titanic scraped along the massive wall of ice. The collision didn't sound like an explosion. There was no violent crash. Many passengers felt only a slight vibration, as if the ship had rolled over a rough road. Some barely noticed anything at all. But below the waterline, the iceberg had torn open several sections of the ship's steel hull. Seawater rushed into the front compartments at an unstoppable rate. Within minutes, ship designer Thomas Andrews inspected the damage. His face told the story before he even spoke. The Titanic could survive with 4 flooded compartments, but 6 compartments were already filling with water. There was no way to stop it. The water would continue spilling from one compartment into the next until the ship was completely lost. Thomas Andrews quietly delivered the devastating news to Captain Edward Smith. "The ship will sink." The captain stood in silence for a moment. Then he gave the order no one ever wanted to hear. "Prepare the lifeboats." At that moment, the fate of more than 2,200 people was sealed. The greatest maritime disaster in history had officially begun. At first, very few passengers believed the Titanic was actually sinking. The ship still looked stable. The lights were on. The band continued playing music. Crew members calmly asked passengers to put on their life jackets and come up to the boat deck. Many people thought it was only a precaution. Some even laughed and returned to their cabins to collect jewelry, money, and warm clothes. They simply couldn't imagine that a ship this magnificent could disappear beneath the ocean. But below the decks, the situation was becoming desperate. Icy seawater flooded the engine rooms. Engineers and firemen worked tirelessly to keep the lights on and the power running, knowing they had little chance of surviving themselves. Their sacrifice gave hundreds of passengers valuable extra time to escape. Soon, Captain Edward Smith gave another heartbreaking order. Women and children first. The crew began lowering the lifeboats. But there was one major problem. The Titanic had only 20 lifeboats, enough for about 1,178 people, even though more than 2,200 people were on board. Shockingly, many of the first lifeboats left only half full. People still believed the Titanic was safer than a small wooden boat floating in the freezing Atlantic. Some passengers even refused to leave the ship. As the bow slowly sank lower into the water, the truth became impossible to ignore. Panic spread across the decks. Families were separated in seconds. Husbands kissed their wives goodbye. Parents held their children tightly, hoping they would survive. Some men stepped back willingly, giving their place to women and children. Others desperately searched for any chance to escape. The officers struggled to maintain order as the number of remaining lifeboats rapidly decreased. Meanwhile, the musicians continued playing, not because they were ordered to, but because they wanted to keep people calm during the terrifying final moments. Their courage would become one of the most unforgettable stories of that tragic night. As the last few lifeboats disappeared into the darkness, more than 1,000 people still remained on the deck. And now, there was nowhere left to run. By 2 a.m., almost all the lifeboats had been launched. The freezing Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly around the Titanic. Far below, the water continued pouring into the ship faster than ever. The bow had already disappeared beneath the surface. The stern rose higher and higher into the air. Passengers struggled to keep their balance as the massive ship tilted at an impossible angle. People held onto railings, chimneys, and anything they could find. Some prayed. Some cried. Others stood in complete silence, accepting their fate. Then, suddenly, the ship's lights began to flicker. For a few terrifying seconds, they flashed on and off. And then, complete darkness. The only sounds were the freezing wind, the roar of the ocean, and the terrified voices of thousands of people. At approximately 2:20 a.m. on April 15th, 1912, the unimaginable happened. The Titanic broke apart. The enormous ship split into two sections. The bow disappeared beneath the ocean first. Moments later, the stern stood almost vertically in the air before crashing back into the sea and finally sinking beneath the icy Atlantic. Within minutes, the Titanic was gone. The ocean became filled with wreckage, floating furniture, pieces of wood, and more than 1,500 people struggling in water that was close to -2 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Fahrenheit. In such freezing conditions, the human body could survive only for a short time. One by one, the voices calling for help began to fade. Then, silence. A silence so haunting that the survivors in the lifeboats would remember it for the rest of their lives. The greatest ship ever built had disappeared beneath the Atlantic Ocean in less than 3 hours after striking the iceberg. But for those still alive in the lifeboats, the nightmare was far from over. The survivors sat silently in the lifeboats, surrounded by darkness and freezing air. Many were in shock. Others stared at the empty ocean, unable to believe that the Titanic had vanished beneath the waves. Some lifeboats wanted to return and rescue people still struggling in the water, but many feared that desperate swimmers would overwhelm the small boats, causing them to sink as well. As a result, only a few lifeboats turned back. By the time they reached the area, it was too late for most of those in the icy water. Hours passed. Then, just before sunrise, a distant light appeared on the horizon. It was the RMS Carpathia. The ship had received Titanic's distress calls and sailed through the dangerous ice fields at full speed to help. One by one, the exhausted survivors were pulled aboard. They were given warm blankets, hot drinks, dry clothes, and medical care. Many cried with relief. Others searched desperately for family members, hoping they had survived. Sadly, for countless people, those reunions never happened. Out of more than 2,200 passengers and crew, only around 700 survived. More than 1,500 people lost their lives, making the Titanic one of the deadliest peacetime maritime disasters in history. The tragedy shocked the entire world. Newspapers across the globe carried the heartbreaking story. Governments launched official investigations. Experts discovered that the disaster wasn't caused by the iceberg alone. There were not enough lifeboats. Several ice warnings had not been taken seriously enough. Communication failures, overconfidence, and poor emergency planning all contributed to the tragedy. Because of these lessons, international maritime safety laws changed forever. Ships were required to carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board. Continuous radio communication became mandatory. Regular emergency drills and improved safety procedures became standard across the world. More than a century has passed since that cold April night. Yet the story of the Titanic continues to inspire books, documentaries, museums, and one of the most famous movies ever made. The ship may have disappeared beneath the Atlantic Ocean, but its story will never be forgotten. Because the Titanic wasn't just a ship, it became a timeless reminder that no matter how powerful human ambition may be, nature always has the final word. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves history. I'll see you in the next documentary. For more than 70 years, the Titanic remained hidden beneath the Atlantic Ocean. No one knew its exact location. Many believed the wreck would never be found. Then, in 1985, a team led by oceanographer Dr. Robert Ballard finally discovered the Titanic resting nearly 3,800 meters, or 12,500 feet, below the surface of the ocean. The discovery shocked the world. The ship was not resting in one piece. Instead, it had broken into two large sections, lying hundreds of meters apart on the ocean floor. Around the wreck were thousands of personal belongings: shoes, dishes, suitcases, watches, eyeglasses, and many other objects. Each item silently told the story of someone who had once been on board. Over the years, many myths about the Titanic have spread across the internet. Some people believe the ship was cursed. Others claim there was a conspiracy behind the disaster. Some even suggest that the Titanic was secretly switched with its sister ship, the Olympic, before the voyage. However, historians and investigators have found no reliable evidence to support these theories. The facts remain clear. The Titanic struck an iceberg. The damage was far greater than the ship could survive. A shortage of lifeboats, human error, and overconfidence turned an accident into one of history's greatest tragedies. Even today, the wreck continues to change. Scientists say bacteria living deep in the ocean are slowly consuming the ship's iron structure. One day, the Titanic may completely disappear beneath the sea, but its story never will. Every generation continues to learn from the lessons of that tragic night. The Titanic reminds us that confidence should never replace preparation, and that every life, no matter how rich or poor, has equal value in the face of nature. Thank you so much for watching this documentary. More than 100 years have passed, but the story of the Titanic still teaches us one powerful lesson. No matter how advanced technology becomes, human life is always precious, and nature should never be underestimated. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next documentary. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and thanks for watching.